I want to react to this comment right here by INH African, which says, "Isn't it an exaggeration that Africa has no Neanderthal DNA? Also, why are Ethiopians excluded from the conversation? What is a black African? Why are so many people classed as black African when none of us look the same? Yet Ethiopians are the horn of Africans, and plenty of them look exactly like those we call black, and are in fact far darker than anyone you'll see in Black Africa. Same applies to North Africa, where there are plethora of black populations, but is black a color or something else? What is black? Now, for context, he was reacting to my video where I was talking about the genetics that were found of a ancient black African people found in Libya, which we have no idea why this site is isolated and why these people have Neanderthal DNA when most Africans do not. Now, let's answer his question. So, let's start with the first question that he asked. Isn't it an exaggeration that Africa has no Neanderthal DNA? Well, given that the fact that the video was about me talking about an African people that have Neanderthal DNA, it's of course an exaggeration. And of course, we have North Africans all over the place showing Neanderthal DNA. But the point of the video, I think, was that Africans, no matter where you look, whether you're talking about the pale skin ones or if you're talking about the dark skin ones, they all have a 1% number of DNA. This is about half the number that most people have outside of Africa. So Ethiopians, as you mentioned, have the DNA of Neanderthals, but they only have it at about 1%. And then you have some other Africans that have it at 0%. So it's not that they have no DNA, it's that it's reduced. And so it's quite clear that Neanderthals, who by all other measures seem to evolve outside of Africa, Neanderthals are mainly found and they mainly evolve further outside of Africa, which is why you have the Denisovans and you don't really get the DNA of Denisovans in Africa. The second question also, why are Ethiopians excluded from the conversation? Well, I don't think they are excluded. In my video, I added them, and even in the document that I was reading, they included Ethiopians as a test for the people because, of course, they talked about the fact that the people who were these people that were stationed in Ethiopia and moved north. That's one of their theories. So they don't exclude them. What is a black African? Well, that's a very difficult question, but the simple answer is it's someone who is of a darker skin who lives in Africa. Just like a black American would be someone who has descendants from Africa but has a darker skin than the other people, and so on. Why are so many people classed as black African when none of us look the same? Well, it's the same reason you can't really have groups or head things as groups if you choose to take that route. Because, of course, if you go to Europe, why would we class Europeans the same when you can see in places like Sweden and stuff that one of the dominant genes makes people blonde, at least in their youth? And then when you go down to the south, some of them get darker in skin. And if you go to the east, some of them sort of look like Arabs. And if you go to the west, they're like super pale. To some degree, it's arbitrary. I agree with you. But it has to be classified this way in order to get an answer. If when we get deep inside Africa, they completely separate these people. So, for example, when you get inside Africa, they start to break down the genes. So they have four groups. They have the Cushitic groups, right? They have the Khoisan groups. They have the Bantu groups, and then they have the Niger groups. These groups are considered completely different when you're looking deep into Africa, and they have results inside them that have nothing to do with each other. A good example of this is, I think it was 2020, I forgot what year it was. In West Africa, they discovered a new type of human that did not exist anywhere else in Africa. And then they discovered another type of human that was found in Kenya that was distributed throughout Africa. It was discovered in Kenya, but when they went and tested genes of people in America, Black Americans, they found the genes. They call these ghost populations. And in Africa, there's a few now that have been discovered. Of course, with this more recent one, it's less a ghost and more a, I don't know. But with this recent one, there's a new population that's in there. And it's funny how things change when you work from a perspective that is different, because long time ago, geneticists said there's nothing interesting, nothing foreign about the DNA. And then as soon as they discovered the Neanderthals in everyone except, with quotation marks, people in Africa, they found high results of them outside of Africa. They started finding these ghost populations, these everywhere, which tells you, which by the way, they went and looked back at some of their older DNA and found that it was everywhere in there. I mean, the Neanderthal one, they didn't get new DNA. They just discovered, oh, that's that, and then they looked into their files and it was everywhere. So it tells you that they were not looking for it, and so they didn't find it. And this is something that should be taken into consideration when we talk about the fact that Africa is probably the least checked out civilization. I was going to say surveyed, but might not be accurate in this sense. Population when it comes to the genetics of the people. And so when we look at DNA and we declare statements about where they are and where they come from, yes, there is a problem because 90% of Africans have never had a DNA test. And probably that is an exaggeration. It's probably like 98% or something like that. Let's carry on. So, what is a black African? Why are so many people classed as black Africans when none of us look the same? Also, that I have a problem with that look the same thing, because I don't think being a black African is only about the way you look. Take these three women, for instance. You can see that they have a similar face, and even lip size and everything is very similar. Now, why does this matter if these people have very similar faces? Well, it's because they're from three completely different continents. But you could classify them in one group. The word they used to use was mongoloid, but that's gone now. The word they use to describe these people is words like Asiatic face, or, they have different words. I forgot the words, but these people, as you can see, could be classified in a completely different group, even though they are genetically very apart. The thing that draws a lot of Africans together is their genes, their culture, and all of that. But again, this is a very arbitrary thing to some degree, because, of course, I think this similarity is as real and as useful as any other similarity that we use in history. Next, he says, yet Ethiopians are the horn of Africans, huh? And plenty of them look exactly like those we call black, and are in fact far darker than anyone you'll see in Black Africa. Same applies to North Africa, where there are a plethora of black populations. But is black a color or something else? What is black? Well, I can easily tell you that most Africans are not as dark as Ethiopians. Most Africans actually are not as dark as anyone living just north of the equator. For example, if you get people from the Dinka tribes or the Sudanese tribes, they tend to be extremely dark skinned. Then you get people from Ethiopia who also are dark skinned, but they have some very pale people there as well. And so do the Sudanese people. But if we talk about what what people are the darkest in Africa, it's like the Sudanese are probably number one. Then we get to some Ethiopians, then West Africans, and I've seen plenty of like very light skinned West Africans. And remember, where they live matters a lot too, because a lot of West Africans, when they move to the southern parts, the sun doesn't affect them the same that it would if they lived in West Africa, and so their skin color changes dramatically. Remember something, we did not name ourselves black. Black Africans did not name themselves black. That came from everybody else. And remember, I told you that it was the Romans who first encountered the first type. You see, the woman with the head wrap, they encountered that type and they called those people black. And the people in southern Africa, that would be the second one, with the grandmother and the young girl, that type was never seen by the Romans. And then the third one, which is West African, those were seen, which carried on the idea that Africans are all dark skinned. But I do think that had they run into the first one, the second one first, they would have had a different opinion on whether or not these people all come from the exact same tribe. But let's ignore that and let's talk about the fact that, okay, what I'm showing you here is typical of these people's tribes specifically. The skin color. Now, it's not accurate 100%, but it's typical. Most people who are of Dinka DNA look like the first woman. Most people who are of Khoisan DNA, and I even have like parents and family members and all of that, that color that you're seeing there, that's not an exception. That's not bleach. That's not none of that. That's how most people that I've seen from Southern Africa, they kind of look like that. And I don't just mean the color, because even the ones who are darker skinned tend to have the same features as these people: thick lips, Asian like eyes, very coarse hair. Everything else is exactly the same, except they're darker, some of them. But most people, like this grandmother, as you see there, a lot of black Africans, black South Africans, tend to be only as dark as the grandmother in the back. And they some of them can't get darker than that. And that's a lot of people, by the way. And then, of course, you get West Africans who I've seen West Africans who are as light as that girl over there. By the way, when I say South Africans, I don't mean people who live in South Africa specifically. I include Zimbabwe, Botswana, and many other places. So, yes, the idea that the word black is an umbrella term. And of course, there are people who are way darker than a lot of Africans who don't even live in Africa. I mean, Indians get real dark too, but they're not considered black people, at least not in the modern day. I've shown you that Arabs used to call them black people in the past, but they abandoned that when they wanted to separate the populations. The next commenter said, the Sahel is not the Sahara region of Africa. It is the transition region between the desert and the fertile land south of the desert. I don't know what this is in reference to, but I guess it's a great time to learn. So yes, the Sahara Desert and the Sahel are slightly different, even though parts of the Sahel would still be considered the Sahara. And yeah, that's about it. It is important to understand, though, that a lot of these words would have changed due to, you know, times. Of course, what the people in the Arabic days called the Sahara and what people call the Sahara today is very different, because Ibn Battuta and all of them, they see it as a the air. They don't actually, to some degree, include Egypt as part of the Sahara in that book, at least. But again, that's just like a little difference. And of course, Sahara Desert doesn't make sense because the word Sahara means desert, so it would be desert, desert. Doesn't make sense. But the next commenter says, "My guy, this is such an interesting development. Thank you for finding most of the interesting bits up about our past. Yes, this is very interesting, but another commenter kind of made me make this video early. I was going to make it later, and I'm thankful for it because I think it wouldn't have hit the same as if I put it, you know, later or earlier. So, yeah, I'm thankful for that guy as well. I'm also thankful for the people who are watching. So, yeah, thank you." The final commenter says, FYI, the physical affinities of tephrolat and Tokakori samples and many other ancient North African samples that have been genetically sequenced is something we don't need to guess at. Numerous anthropology studies exist on these remains. In a nutshell, Takakori mummies are more similar to Equatorial Africans, both contemporary as well as ancient samples from Gobero and Mali. Teferat samples show an opposite trend with a more similar to coastal North African morphology, with some peculiarities that point at their more local nature. I agree, I think, if I understand what you're saying. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Sharing really gets the video out there, so do that. Tell somebody. People need to know. So, thank you.